I got to put my back against the wall. I have to give myself one of two choices. I either die on this mountain or I summit and I make exactly what I set out to make. And there is no other option.
Hi, I'm Wyatt.
And I'm Grace.
And you're listening to our dad and your host of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Moore, and I am really, really excited about our guest today. For our Experts Corner, you guys know we do shows within the show, and on Fridays, we always talk to experts, whether they're expert investors or experts outside of the investing world, and we brought in one of the best. I'm really excited to talk to Mr. Keaton Hoskins. Some of you know him as The Muscle. He is a big dude, and so he got that nickname for a reason, but Keaton, I'm super, super excited about this conversation we're going to have today.
Yeah, man, I'm honored to be here with you.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, I really appreciate it. And we obviously the Vacation Rental Revolution, we're always trying to help people walk into the vacation rental investing game with their eyes wide open and ultimately decide if this is the road they want to run down. But anytime you're running down a road, a lot of the big blocks for people are on the, high performance mental blocks, the things that they're talking about. I know you launched the Limitless Society. We're going to talk a lot about that, but that's really what you guys focus on before we get into all the nuts and bolts, right? I always love to start with the background, right? There's usually a turning point. Some people are tagged serial entrepreneurs. Like, I really think that you are a serial entrepreneur. When I'm looking up your background, I'm like, whoa, this guy has done a lot of stuff. And, there's a lot of really high performers, high producers. And a lot of times they say, hey, you got to focus on one thing. And I want you to talk about your background, but I always, then I'm going to ask some deeper questions about that. But you have been around the block for your age, right? I mean, you're you've lived a little bit. I always say at the end of every episode, pick that one thing they can do today to start building the life they don't want to take a vacation from. Yeah. You built the life you don't want to take a vacation from. So let's dive into what was the turning point there?
It's funny. I have this conversation a lot, even when I talk to people about picking the right mentor, picking the right place to invest your money. Essentially, you need to find somebody who has the life that you want, right? And if you're not that person, you shouldn't be teaching anybody anything at all. And for me, I started at a really young age. When I was 21, my father passed away, and he had preached hard, 9 to 5, go to school, get your degree, work up through the ranks. That's the safe route. And when he passed away, I realized that wasn't the safe route. And I knew that I was never going to be able to do it. I was horrible in school. I was horrible with direction. I couldn't listen to anybody. And ultimately, I knew the only route for me is if I was going to build anything, it had to be off of my own back. And real quickly, after my father passed away, I kind of came up with a saying that I've kind of lived and died by since then. And it was, I would rather sink on my own ship than I would sail on somebody else's. And that's when I started my entrepreneur journey, if you will. And from that time until today, it's funny, I was actually thinking about this last night. I don't know how many companies I bought or started. It's well over 40. I'm not sure. I was actually I probably should list some of that out because I say it all the time, but I don't know what it is at this point. But from the time I was 21 until today, I essentially said, I know that if I want it, I have to build it. It's on my back. I'm responsible for it. And ultimately, I'm the one that's going to move the needle. Nobody else is going to do it. And so at a young age, I started a company and another company and another company and bought another company. And just like you said, got into being a serial entrepreneur. And then about 2 years ago, I was sitting in the living room with my wife and I was thinking about the next company and the next thing that I wanted to do. And it was a moment in my life when I realized I no longer wanted to just make money or build a company. I wanted to have an impact on people. And that's ultimately when I came up with Limitless Society, my coaching program, which essentially is teaching people how to become the greatest version of themselves. And the whole reason that this was so important to me is because I knew one thing, which was really important. The more I worked on myself, the more money and success that I had. Yep. And one of my favorite mentors, one of my favorite coaches, Jim Rohn, says very simply, if you'll work twice as hard on yourself as you do on anything else, you will build the life that you want. And I realized as I built companies, I wasn't getting better at building companies. I was getting better at building me. And by the time I was 30, I had burned down a lot of things in my life. My first marriage, a lot of good relationships, a lot of things. And at 30 years old, I was like, dude, you got to work on you. You're the problem, but you're also the solution. And then when I kind of had this whole thing come to me, I started to work on me more than anything else. And at that point, my businesses got better. My relationships got better. My money got better. Everything got better. And that's when then I ultimately got catapulted into, you know what, man? You should teach people that if they truly want to become successful, they've got to focus on the most important investment they can make, and that's in them. And the more they focus on them, the more success they'll see across the board. And so I fell in love with, the coaching space. I still own 6 companies today. I'm actually launching another company in a month. I'll always be an entrepreneur, but I've fallen in love with helping people become the greatest version of themselves and then watching those people crush it in their businesses, in their investments, in their portfolios, because they themselves become the human that can do what we all talk about doing, the tools, the education, all of that stuff.
I love it. I love it. I love where this is going, because there's something we say around this, around Vodacy and around what we're doing is, nobody's coming to save us. And that's really what you're saying. We must get back to that idea that personal character, individual responsibility, those are the ultimate keys to building the life you don't want to take that vacation from, right? We call it the cowboy way. We also call it the Vodacy way. So we always say a cowboy is not about the hats and the boots, right? It's about choosing that disciplined, rugged way of life that's deeply connected to personal responsibility and self-reliance. And that's really what you're talking about. So, Keaton, if I could, I'll get you that cowboy hat and send it to you, because I think you got that cowboy.
I love it. I have a lot of cowboy hats. I'm a cowboy at heart myself. I love it. So,
but that's what we're getting back to, right? Is that personal responsibility, self-reliance, and then it's and people always ask about coaching, and you said, hey, you fall in love with it, right? And I don't think a lot of people really understand it. I get accused of this. I'm sure you do all the time. Of, well, if you're so damn good at it, why do you even teach people how to do this? Why do you coach it? Just go do it. Well, but. Yeah. I always try to relate it back to most people who have kids and that are parents. We look at our kids and we wish, like I always wish and pray like crazy that they would see the potential that I see in them, that they would see the talent that I see in them. And I think once we know that as a parent, when you're able to do that with adults, and you look at them and say, man, you're a lot closer than you think you are. Man, if you could just get out of your own way right here and you could just focus right here. I know that you're a big fan of Ed Mylett. I'm a fan of Ed Mylett. You know Ed Mylett. I don't personally know Ed Mylett, but he talks about a lot about, setting your standards. You're never going to outperform your standards. He talks about the thermostat, right? And setting that thermostat. And I'd love your opinion on this as well is, people always, ask, when Ed's always saying, hey, listen, if you're making $250,000 a year, if you're making $1 million a year, if you're making $100,000 a year and you lose it all, and tomorrow you have to go build it back, it's really easy actually to build back to where you were. Right? Yeah, it's really, really easy. You almost naturally will go back. You go bankrupt, you will go back to that setting that you were at. What I find really, really difficult is not when somebody's back's against the wall, that rags to riches story, or when your back's against the wall, it's pretty easy to come back up, because you're going to go back up to where you're naturally were at. What I think is really, really hard for people to do is when they are at 75 to take it to 85 or 100, and I know that you deal with that a lot. I'd love to have a little bit of a conversation about that and your opinions and what are some of the things you look at?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So one of my really good friends is Haloti Ngata. He was one of the best NFL players in the world. And I spent some time with him one day at one of his last games in his last season. I was in the locker room with him, and I was looking around at all these NFL players. And after the game, I was sitting in the locker room with him, and I said, hey, Lo, what makes a really, really good football player? What makes a really good, football star? What's made you the person you are? And he said to me, one of the most powerful statements I ever heard. He said, good is the enemy to best. Yeah. And he said, see, what you see, those people who aren't succeeding, those ones who aren't the best, they got good and they became comfortable with good. See, when I'm bad, all I'm focused on is getting better. But when I get good, I no longer have the discomfort. I no longer have my back against the wall. And that's ultimately where a lot of people are at. You see people all the time, they make 250K and then they make 250K the rest of their lives because it's just good enough. It keeps you off of what's called death ground. One of my favorite philosophers, Sun Tzu, he talks about death ground. He says that death ground is when you take warriors and you give them two options. You either fight your way out or you die. There is no other option. And when you put a human being on death ground, they fight with 3 times the force that they would normally have. And the problem is that death ground is rock bottom. Death ground is at the bottom. But when I get out of it and I get good, I no longer have that death ground. I no longer put in the energy and the effort to go that next step, that next level. And like my friend Haloti said, all of these guys you see in this locker room who are sitting here making a decent paycheck, sitting on the sidelines, they're just good enough. And good is the enemy to best. And they don't realize that if they continue to put in the effort that got them to the NFL while in the NFL, they would become the best. And the problem, again, I see it every day in my life. I see guys who are doing good. They're doing just good enough. They're comfortable. And nobody wants to be uncomfortable because uncomfortable and pain is when we grow. We pull ourselves out of it because we're just good enough. One of the greatest things that I teach is helping people identify, is this truly what you want? And of course, nobody's going to say, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Nobody wants to admit that. Although their actions would tell you otherwise. I would say, if that is what you want, you have to understand you have become the enemy to that which you seek because you're just good enough. And as long as you stay in good, you will never become the best. And that's when you have to take inventory of yourself and say, okay, man, I'm at this level. I need to go to the next, and I have to fabricate death ground. I got to put my back against the wall. I have to give myself one of two choices. I either die on this mountain or I summit and I make exactly what I set out to make. And there is no other option because when you're good, you have plenty of options. Oh, I could sit back. I'll just make another 250. I could sit back. I'll make 200. If I work a little bit harder, I'll make 300. But that's the people who will never truly accomplish their true potential. And when I sit down with people, I'm like, listen, if you want to become the greatest version of yourself, you have to understand you're good. But that's the enemy to the greatest version of yourself. It's time to chase that human being by putting your back against the wall and going, you know what? I got to go all in. What got me from bad to good, I must do to get from good to best.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then it's a constant battle, right?
Yes.
You're always raising the bar. And I find it the hardest thing for me as a coach to get somebody to understand that concept because the majority of people I work with, they've got disposable income. They're buying vacation homes. They're buying investment properties. They've got extra money. But they're comfortable, right? I always say, the biggest enemy to their success is they're getting comfortable sitting on the sidelines. They're getting comfortable at that level that they're at. And it's really easy to talk about it and say, and you're exactly right. There's a lot of high performers that we take it personal, and they'll take it personal if you're like, hey, listen, you're not that good, right? You're getting comfortable. Nobody wants to be told they're getting comfortable. And, I used to play college basketball, and a lot of my roommates and some of my best friends played in the NBA and say the same thing. The difference in the talent level between the guys that are sitting on the bench and the guys that are playing is almost negligible, right? They're all very, very talented. Yeah. It's who got comfortable, who decided to say, hey, listen, I'm going to go through the motions, right? I always, it's that discipline and that effort that they're putting in, and they're not raising the bar on either of them. And I remember, I've lost everything twice. There's a couple of times, and every time I lose it, I springboard back to where I was. Yeah. But it's always really, really difficult. The money that I make, I think is pretty good. I've got an 8-figure company and everything else. But there's other guys levels ahead of me that would look at me and be like, I can't even pay my utility bills on what you make, right? And there's always these levels, and it's how do we push past that? And I love this conversation because I just feel like for somebody listening is, do you take somebody through certain steps? Like I know for me, I actually challenge them and say, I take their money, and then we have a one-on-one, and I'll say, this isn't the right fit for you. right? This isn't right. I look at it. I think you're too comfortable. I actually don't think you've got that fight and that fire in your belly to get to the next step. And I want to just see if they were going to push back at me. Right.
Yeah.
Do you do anything similar? How do you get?
Yes, very much so. In fact, I just had a conversation earlier today. So there's two types of mindsets. And we talked about mindset before we even got on this podcast and how important your mindset is, right? Like the most powerful tool you have is your mindset. There's really only two types of mindset. It's scarcity and it's abundancy. Like that's it. There's nothing left. And the reality is those who stay in an abundant mindset are continually putting out what they expect to get back. When you find someone who's good, they stop putting out the effort because it's uncomfortable to put things out. It's a risk, it's a stress, it's anxiety. But in an abundant mindset, when you're truly in an abundant mindset, you understand the most important thing you could possibly do is invest in two things, yourself and your business. And you go at that until your back is against the wall. So I sit down with people all the time. Hey, I've got $10 million. Awesome. Do you want to grow? Yes. Okay. It's going to cost you $10 million to get to $100 million. Are you willing to do that? Yes, I am. I will put everything in so that I can get 10x back. And most people, even when they start, they get to a place in an abundant mindset. And then in that comfort, they go back to scarcity and they go, you know what, man, I'm good enough. I got $10 million. I'm good. I want to set back. But for those who understand this abundant mindset, they understand I will continually put in what I want to get back. I will put everything in because I expect everything back. And again, you hear those people, it cost me $100,000 to get to a millionaire. It cost me $1 million to get to 10 million. It's going to cost me 10 million to get to 100 million and 100 million to get to $1 billion. But at some point when you stop, it's because your mindset shifted from that abundant mindset of investing into yourself, into your business, into your growth, that you go, I'm good. I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to take that risk. I don't need to invest that money. I don't need to go after that education. I don't need to put all those things out because I'm just good enough. So when I work with people, the first place we start is, where is your mind? Where can you identify that you are scarce? And for those who are very successful, it's pretty easy to see they've sat in that success and stayed at that level of success because of the scarcity that they are now in. Once you take a true inventory of that scarcity, you then have the choice. Do I wish to stay here in this scarcity, or is it time for me to go back into an abundant mindset? I have tons of money, but it's going to take tons of money to make more money. I have tons of success, but it's going to take tons of success to make more success. And in that mindset, you identify where you're scarce, you become abundant, and then you go like a savage at becoming better, leveling up, growing, getting better. And by the way, there's a simple process to this too. The people you surround yourself with. If I'm always the richest and the most successful in every room, of course I'm going to feel comfortable. I don't want to be that person. We talked about Ed Milet. He's become a very dear friend of mine. It's crazy. I'm fairly successful. And I sit in a room with Trump, Ed Milet, I'm going to meet Glenn Beck tomorrow. I'm going on his podcast tomorrow. I'm going to be around people who are hundreds of millions of dollars because I want to be the brokest, the dumbest, the smallest in every room. So that in my abundant mindset, I now have a new goal that I set out to say, hey, I feel good where I'm at, but I am not there yet, and I will get there. And I know what it will take. It will take everything I currently have to get there. And whatever that is, I'm putting it there, and I'm going to put my back against the wall because I want that. And the people I surround myself with are the ones that inspire me to do that. So again, for your listeners who are like, man, I feel pretty good, I would say, look at the circles you're in. Are you the richest? Are you the smartest? Are you the most famous? Are you the most successful? You got to get your ass out of those circles. Yeah. Find the circles. Spend the money to be in those other circles that are bigger, that are greater, that inspire you to do more and force you to become more abundant in that which you put out.
Absolutely. And it goes in multiple circles, right? From, your faith circles, your family circles. I know you talk about multiple pillars in the Limitless Society, and I've heard you talk about it on some of the podcasts you've been on. But when you're talking, let's just stay on the point that you're bringing up of, the circles and the people that you're surrounding yourself with, because I'll be honest, looking from the outside, looking in, when you put together the Limitless Arena last September here in Utah, I thought to myself, and I wanted to go to that so bad, by the way. I was in Alaska fishing during that week, and I go to Alaska every single September, and it happened to be while I was in Alaska. But when you look at that lineup that you put together from a guy that, and I know you've got, you're a serial entrepreneur, everything else, but it would be a struggle for many of those monsters on the stage to put that lineup together. Right. And it was unreal. And so, but that just goes to your, one, obviously your hustle and your ability to do it, but your belief that you could actually put that together. Because I'll be honest, I would think, oh man, I would never be able to do that. Right. Yeah. And I'm like, it was really inspiring. And it was a rock star event is from what I heard. Well,
about. Dude, it was phenomenal. And it's funny you say that. That was an exact example of exactly what I was saying. At that point in my life, I had about $3 million to my name. Like, that's all I had. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? That event cost me $3 million. I had to go, you know what, man? I want to go to the next level. And the next level is going to cost me every single thing that I have. And by the way, it stressed me out. It put my back against the wall. I literally put $3 million out, and I was like, well, I hope that this blows up. I hope that things go successful. But either way, I knew I wanted to be in those circles. I knew I wanted to create that event. I knew I wanted to go to a new level of speaking and the people that I surround myself with. And it costs everything that I had in that current moment. Now, at 35 years old, I could have sat back and said, hey, man, I make $500,000 a month. I've got $3 million to my name. I'm pretty good. I'll just sit back and do these small events. But I had that choice to either stay scarce or to choose abundancy. And in that abundancy, you're damn right, it took everything I had to ultimately catapult to the next level and the next level. And, as we're talking, I have a meeting next week with Trump and his team. I'm planning on getting Trump out. My plan for this next event is an even bigger lineup of even bigger people that I myself want to spend time with. And you better believe it's going to cost me a shit ton of money, a shit ton of time, and a shit ton of energy. But I have to do it because in my abundant mindset, I have to put out more. And the more I put out, the more I will get. And I'll continue to do this until the day I die.
Yeah, that's the point too. I think that is that people that are listening, you need to understand there's not an end game, right? Any high performer that I've ever talked to, and I'm always trying to listen from the sidelines, try to have these conversations, and there's never an end game. It's not, hey, if I do this, I'm done, right? It's the pursuit and growth is the game, right? And it's till you're in the ground 6 feet under is when we end up quitting, right?
And the only way to realize that is to realize that the true purpose and succession of man is to chase progression. Yeah, that's why we find people who are filthy rich who are not happy. Because they don't have a true purpose. They are no longer chasing progression in any of, I talk about 5 pillars of progression. They have stopped. And no matter how much success they've had, no matter how much money they have, they find no happiness, purpose, peace, because they have stopped doing the one thing that man was created to do, which is to progress, no matter what it is. And again, you talk about those 5 pillars. I sit down with people and I go, listen, if all you want to do is hire me to make you filthy rich, I don't want to work with you because that's a byproduct of what we will do. Yeah. I focus on physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, and financial health. But if I am not focused in all of those and always progressing in all of those, no matter how successful I become, at some point I will lose my purpose and I will lose my happiness and all of the things that we were meant to do here on this planet. And I see it all the time. I see men who have reached a level that they thought they would find happiness at, and they didn't realize there's no end game to this. There is no level that you find happiness at. It's continually chasing one thing. It's progression. Yeah. Your business needs to grow. Your health needs to grow. Your spirit needs to grow. All of those things. And as you understand that, then I'm only on one path. I'm only here to progress. I'm only here to get better across the board, and I will never cease at doing that. And in an abundant mindset, I know I can get better in every one of them every day for the rest of my life. So that's what I'll chase.
Love it. How important is, which I think is hugely important. I'd love to hear your opinion about this. I work with a lot of athletes, and because of my background, I know you do as well, business owners. And an athlete is a good example of somebody that when their career ends, a lot of times they gain a lot of weight, they go into depression, everything else, and their identity is in that as being an athlete, right? And when you see really high performers, their identity is in the person that is willing to lay it on the line, their back's against the wall, and they always want to be moving forward. And as soon as they hit that goal, they're looking for the next place where they can lay it on the line. And their identity is in that progression and being that person that is always growing, right? And I think that when somebody can change to where that becomes their identity, then that limitless, lifestyle and building the life you don't want to take a vacation from really starts to open up for them.
Absolutely. I won't say the name. I have a really good friend who was a 7-time CrossFit champion. And I watched this person crush everything in their life. So much happiness, so much purpose. Well, when it was time to be done with CrossFit, they essentially found themselves lost. And to this day, still very lost, still well-to-do, has money, still in decent shape. But because they didn't understand that your identity is in the chase of progress. Yeah. The pursuit of progress. That's what your identity should be. When people ask me now, what are your goals? I say, I only have one goal. I want to get better than I was yesterday. Everything I can possibly get better at. I will never stop chasing progression. And that is my identity. It's not my TV show. It's not my businesses. It's not my health. It's not one thing. It's one purpose, to chase progression. And again, that's where you find your greatest joy, your greatest happiness, your greatest purpose, your greatest peace. And that's where people get lost a lot. And that goes all the way back to what we talked about earlier, which is you get good and then you stop chasing the progression to get better.
Yeah, love it. And that's where, this is where, from the outside looking in, so I apologize if you don't think this is right. This is my opinion. When I look at you and I look at all the businesses that you've invested in, and I look at what you've done, they're all over the place. Like there's all kinds of different businesses. You're not an operator in a sense, but you're addicted to seeing stuff grow. Yes. I recognize that you look at these businesses and say, okay, I see an opportunity for growth, and you become addicted to the growth. And I think that goes into the businesses. And again, my observation, my opinion, just looking from the outside looking in. But I think that's what translates into everything else you're doing. And what you're getting really good at is being able to recognize the opportunity for growth within the people you work with. And that's even more important. And there's more, right? That's what I see.
You're 100% right. I don't operate my businesses. I have a CEO, a CMO, a CFO, a CPA. I don't work in my businesses. I start them because I want to grow them. And when I fell in love with what I'm doing is I realized, what I want to do? I want to grow people. Yeah. I want to see people grow. Yeah. There is not a greater joy than that. If you talked about the succession of man, it's simple. You fulfill your needs, then you fulfill your wants, and then you fulfill the needs of other people. And for me in my life, that's where I'm at. I want to see people grow. I want to see marriages grow. I want to see business owners grow. I want to see parenting grow. I want to see fathers grow. I want to see leaders grow. That's where I have fallen so much in love with what I'm doing now is I get the opportunity to sit down with a human being and go, I see where you are, but here is where you could be. And I would love to help you get there. My purpose on this earth is to help you get there. And by the way, and Ed says this, you are most qualified to help the person you used to be. So for me and for you, because you're a coach, I would then in turn go, shit, dude, I got to get better. Because the better I get, the more people I can help. If I can't lead myself, I can't lead somebody else, which again, that's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing now, because it makes me better. I'm seeing progression in myself. If I'm going to lead you, I must first have led myself. And that's why, again, I've really started this Limitless Society is I get to watch thousands of people every day grow. And that's what I'm in love with.
I love it. And the enthusiasm is infectious. Like it's like just having these conversations just always fires me up. I love having conversations with high performers, and what you're doing is, and the first time I heard this concept, so I'm going to give it credit to Ed, Milet, is that, and I live by it ever since I've heard it, is my version of hell is, hitting the pearly gates and then having God tell me in front of me and say, hey, listen, these are all the skills and the talents and everything I placed in front of you and gave you. And this is what you did with them. I want the version of what I could have been and what I became. That I want that version shrunk as, I want that to be as close as possible. And, my hell is realizing the difference between the two, right?
I have this same conversation often when I speak. I tell people, I don't know if I believe in a heaven or hell, but I'll tell you what I do believe in. I think one day we're going to stand in front of God and there's going to be somebody else there. It will be the greatest version of us. Yeah. The one that's in the greatest shape, that made the best money, that was the greatest father, that was the greatest leader, that was the greatest human being that we could have been. And we'll have an opportunity to either look that person in the eyes and stand face to face and said, I became you. Or what I think most people will do, they will look at the ground in embarrassment because they are a pale comparison to what they could have become. That is what I think heaven and hell is. Yeah. And truthfully, when people now ask me, hey, what's your goal? My goal is simple. I'm chasing that motherfucker. Yeah. That's what I'm doing. I'm chasing him, and I will continue to chase him until the time is up in this life, because I will not stand in front of him and look him eye to eye and say, I became you.
Love it. Love it. Well, Keaton, listen, man, I am really honored that you joined me for this conversation. I know you've got a lot of obligations and a hard stop, and I want to be respectful of your time as well. But before we wrap up, we absolutely need to point somebody to, when people are listening, where can they find more of you? Where should they go when they want to be, when they want to raise the bar and they want to be surrounded by people that are pushing them, and, where can they go get more of this from you?
So two answers to that. My program and my group is Limitless Society, and you can find that on limitlesssociety.com. I get to do podcasts all the time, and a lot of people reach out to me and they want to do one-on-one mentoring and get into some of my programs. The best place to reach me personally is on my Instagram. I actually get back to all my messages. I have lots of followers, but I get back to all my messages. My Instagram is _muscle. They can message me there. I would love to have a conversation. I literally, at this point in my life, I just am picking and choosing the people that I want to work with by doing what you were talking about earlier, by pre-qualifying them and saying, hey, if you want to become the greatest version of you, the greatest father, the greatest leader, the greatest business owner, and you're willing to go all at it, I'd love to help you. And that's where they can, essentially reach me.
Awesome, guys. And those of you listening, we always post those links in the show notes, but go check out Limitless Society, and then go check out the.muscle on Instagram. You guys are going to be entertained, because we didn't talk a lot about everything Keaton's going on, but we'll leave it as a little bit of an Easter egg for you to go check out that Instagram page. Pretty amazing lifestyle that you built, and super, super fun to watch from the outside. Really grateful for this conversation. Those of you that are listening, we know how valuable your time is, and we appreciate you spending it with us as well. If you got any value out of this episode, our goal is to help you walk into this game of short-term rental investing and life with their eyes wide open. And so share the show if you know somebody else would like it as well. 30 seconds or more. Go like it, review it on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. And the final, most important thing we ask you at the end of every episode is to pick that one thing you can do today to start building that life you don't want to take a vacation from. Cheers, my friends.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. Share this with other people you think need to hear about it. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Hey Grace, is there a website? Yes! For more amazing content and expert advice, visit Vodacy.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.